That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square and Kevin McCullough, That Kevin Show. We oftentimes try to have the weekend be a little bit lighthearted, a little bit of fun. That's why we have Assignment Desk Weekend and all the comedic elements. But we do have to talk about some serious things from time to time. And my next guest is no stranger to the world of the serious, because she's been fighting for women and their rights in very bold ways in recent years, and doing all of that while becoming a mom 3 times over herself. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Kelsey Bolar. Hello, Kelsey.
Hey, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Every few years, it seems like, you have a new film project that sometimes is a larger piece, sometimes it's broken up into smaller pieces. And we were talking on the radio show not long ago about a new project that's underway. And this weekend, you're releasing the second installment of it. What is it about?
So this is a mini documentary series that's free for anybody to watch on IWF's YouTube account, called Cruel and Unusual Punishment: The Male Takeover of Female Prisons. And it tells the stories of the ways in which female inmates have been harmed and victimized by policies that allow men who identify as transgender or gender non-binary access into women's prisons. All they have to do in states like California is simply declare that they are a woman, and the state will treat them as such and place them not just into the women's prisons, but inside the cells, the living cells with female inmates at night. For those who have no experience inside a women's prison facility, cells in California, for example, house typically 8 women in one very small space that was originally designed to house 4 women. They added bunk beds so that they could accommodate more women. They share a toilet, a shower, and very tight living space. And at night, these doors are locked. So we now have men, many of whom are predatory men convicted of incredibly heinous crimes, child molestation, crimes against women, domestic violence, murder, the worst types of crimes you can think of. These men are now behind closed doors with women, with the doors locked at night, and the women are being silenced. Nobody has given a voice. Nobody has stopped to ask these women, how are these new California policies affecting you? Independent Women's Forum, we're trying to change that. We are exposing the harms that these policies are having on women, not just in California. Men are being housed in female prisons all across the country at this point. And it's about time that we start talking about it.
Okay, a couple of thoughts. And this is a very important subject, but this is the second kind of gender-related docu-series that you've done in a row with the Independent Women's Forum. And I guess I want to pull the lens back to the 35,000-foot perspective for a moment before we zoom back in on this particular issue. But what happened, Kelsey? Like 4 years ago, this stuff was not, it was not on most people's radar screen. And now it's like the screamiest, loudest headline of almost every day, month, and week that something new has happened in some way that is injuring women because of this trans issue. And whether it's robbing women of legitimate championships and scholarships and so forth on the athletic level, whether it's taking kids away from parents who would otherwise be in loving, affirming relationships with these children, trying to help them figure out what life really does mean, instead of trying to get them to pretend that their body is insignificant and they should just change it. To this issue, where did this come from? Why all of a sudden is this like the #1 gravitational issue that seems to be upending everything?
Yeah, well, taking a step back, I think after the Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage took effect, the very well-funded activists had to figure out their next victim class. And so they moved on from the LGB to the T. And let's be very clear, there's a very distinct difference in separation between the LGB and the T. And actually, in many ways, the policies regarding individuals who identify as transgender are actually victimizing disproportionate numbers of young Americans who identify as lesbian or gay. You know, these are kids who are getting brainwashed to believe that they were born in the wrong body, as if there could be such thing, when really perhaps they're just gay, perhaps they're just a lesbian, but instead they're now being pushed down the path to medicalize their bodies. And these activists became so empowered and they were so well funded that they were able to have a stronghold on our politicians and implement the policies that they wanted in regards to the T sector of the population. Meanwhile, the rest of the public was either silent, went along with it, or actively cheered it on.
Well, nobody wants to be
that's
called names, so they
exactly. And I think
gonna...
there's so much sort of trauma and remorse from the ways historically gay and lesbian Americans have been treated that nobody wanted to treat, you know, individuals who identified as transgender any differently. And so they not only wanted to accept them, they wanted to celebrate them without realizing that this is a completely separate issue. You know, being gay, like, does not put a child down a medical path of becoming a lifelong medical patient and potentially shortening that child's life, stripping that child from the ability to have a normal sex life, stripping that child of potentially the ability to ever have their own children. So these are totally separate issues, but I think that's why for so long, activists have gotten away with implementing these sorts of policies. And we're only now taking a step back to really understand and bring light to the ways in which they are impacting different sectors of our population, many of whom are victims to begin with. Inside women's prisons, for example, 92% of female inmates are victims of domestic violence, abuse, something of that nature. These are already women who have been victimized, many of whom, not all of course, but many of whom who are trying to turn their lives around, get out of prison, you know, find remorse and forgiveness for the reasons that landed them in prison in the first place. And all of a sudden they are being re-traumatized by being forced to share a bunk bed with a violent, predatory male. It is so wrong. I think, I hope that this shedding light on this, you know, brings some attention to it and makes, you know, the average person step back and say, yeah, that's probably not a smart thing to do.
Well,
or a compassionate thing to do.
I want to make sure people understand. You can go to iwf.org and see the first installment of this episode right now. And this very weekend, the second episode is being released. So you should find 2 episodes there. But iwf.org is where you would find that. We're going to continue with Kelsey Bolar momentarily here on That Kevin Show. Don't go away.